The great hall was silent. Thousands of alien eyes watched as Yuna walked toward the central platform. Her steps were steady. Her back was straight. She had practiced this moment for weeks. The Galactic Council Chamber was the most beautiful place in the known universe. Crystal pillars rose from the floor to the ceiling, each one glowing with soft blue light. The ceiling itself was made of transparent glass, and through it, a million stars looked down upon the gathered species. Yuna was human. She was the voice of Earth in this place. For 100 years, humanity had been part of the Galactic Accord. They had joined as newcomers, eager to learn and grow among the older races. Now, after a century of loyal service, she had come to ask for something simple, something fair. She wanted her people to be treated as equals. Behind her, Ginho stood with his hands clasped together. He was her deputy, a man of few words but sharp eyes. He watched the alien delegates the way a wolf watches a flock of sheep. He did not trust them. He never had. The 12 species of the Accord sat in their assigned places. The Korath were the largest, their scaled bodies towering over the others. Their delegate, a male named Draven, sat with his arms crossed and his yellow eyes half closed. He looked bored. The Sindari were beautiful in a cold way. Their skin was pale as snow, and their eyes held no warmth. Their delegate Maureen smiled at Yuna as she passed. It was not a kind smile. The Valari had sponsored humanity's entry into the Accord long ago. They were small and gentle, with soft fur and large dark eyes. Their delegate watched Yuna with something like pity. Yuna reached the platform and turned to face the assembly. She took a deep breath. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I come before you today to make a simple request. For 100 years, humanity has served the Accord with loyalty and dedication. Our doctors have healed your sick. Our engineers have built your ships. Our soldiers have died defending your borders." She paused. The hall remained silent. "We've given much and asked for little in return. But today, I ask for something that should not need to be requested. I ask that humanity be granted equal voting rights in this council. I ask that our voice carry the same weight as any other species here." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Draven laughed. It started as a low rumble in his chest. Then it grew louder. His massive body shook with amusement. The sound echoed through the crystal hall like thunder. "The humans want to vote as equals," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "These creatures who crawled out of their gravity well barely 3 centuries ago, these primitive beings who still fight among themselves over resources and territory." Maureen joined in. His laughter was softer, but no less cruel. "Perhaps when they evolve past their primitive emotions, we can revisit this matter. In another 1,000 years, perhaps?" One by one, the other delegates began to laugh. The Nexians clicked their mandibles in amusement. The Thren wheezed through their breathing tubes. Even the Valari, who had once been humanity's friends, looked away in embarrassment and said nothing. Yuna stood frozen on the platform. She did not move. She did not blink. Behind her, Jinho's hands had curled into fists, so tight that his knuckles turned white. The laughter continued for what felt like an eternity. It bounced off the crystal walls and filled every corner of the great hall. It was the sound of 100 years of service being dismissed as nothing. It was the sound of contempt, of arrogance, of utter disrespect. Finally, Draven raised his hand, and the laughter slowly died down. "Little human," he said, still chuckling. "Go back to your embassy and tell your leaders that the Accord is not ready for such changes. Perhaps in time, when your species has matured, we will consider your request." Morin nodded. "Until then, continue doing what you do best, serving your betters." The silence that followed was heavy. Every eye in the chamber was on Yuna. They waited for her to bow her head in shame. They waited for her to apologize for wasting their time. They waited for her to accept her place at the bottom of the hierarchy. But Yuna did none of those things. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. It was no longer warm or hopeful. It was cold as the void between stars,
Oh, very well, she said.
Humanity withdraws its proposal. She turned and walked off the platform. Her steps were slow and deliberate. Jinho fell in beside her, and together they walked toward the exit. Behind them, some delegates were still chuckling. Others had already moved on to other matters. None of them understood what had just happened. None of them saw the fire burning in Yuna's eyes. When they reached the human embassy, Yuna locked the door behind them. She stood in the center of the room, her whole body trembling. "They laughed at us," Jinho said quietly. "After everything we have done for them, they laughed." Yuna said nothing. She walked to her desk and sat down. For a long moment, she simply stared at the wall. Then she began to type. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with fierce precision. When she finished, she read the message one last time. It was addressed to the President of United Earth. It contained only 12 words. "They have made their choice. Now we make ours." She pressed send. That night, as the alien delegates slept peacefully in their quarters, the message traveled across the stars. It reached Earth in a matter of hours. It was read by the most powerful humans in existence. And in that moment, everything changed. The Galactic Accord had existed for 10,000 years. It had survived wars, plagues, and the rise and fall of countless civilizations. But it had never faced anything like what was coming. Humanity had been pushed too far. They had swallowed their pride for a century. They had served with honor and received only mockery in return. No more. The stars themselves seemed to grow darker that night, as if the universe knew that something terrible was about to begin. The message reached Earth at 3 a.m, Seoul time. President Daeho was pulled from his sleep by his chief advisor. He read the 12 words 3 times. Then he got dressed and went to work. By sunrise, every leader on Earth had been contacted. By noon, the United Earth Assembly was in session. By evening, the decision had been made. Daeho stood at the podium, looking out at the representatives of every nation on Earth. Behind him, a massive screen showed the flag of United Earth, a blue globe surrounded by silver stars. He had never felt more proud or more angry in his entire life. For 100 years, he began, "We have given our blood, our sweat, and our tears to the Galactic Accord. We shared our medicine when plagues swept across alien worlds. We sent our engineers to build and repair what others could not. We sacrificed our sons and daughters to defend borders that were not our own." His voice grew harder with each word. "And what did we ask in return? Nothing. We asked only to be treated with basic respect, to be seen as equals. And do you know how they responded?" He paused. The silence was absolute. They laughed at us. A wave of anger rippled through the assembly. Daeho raised his hand. "No more. Today, I am signing the Severance Act. Every treaty, every trade agreement, every mutual defense pact that humanity has ever signed with the Galactic Accord will be terminated. Effective immediately." Picked up the pen and signed his name. The room exploded in applause. The news traveled faster than light. Within hours, every human colony across 17 star systems knew what had happened. Within days, the withdrawal began. On Velar Prime, Draven received the news during his morning meal. His servant handed him the report, and he nearly choked on his food. "This is impossible," he growled. "They cannot simply leave." His aide, a nervous young Koreth named Talon, pulled up the data on a holographic screen. "Sir, it gets worse. The humans supply grain to 9 species. Without their shipments, we could face food shortages within 6 months." Draven waved his hand dismissively. "We will find other sources." "There are no other sources, sir? Human agricultural technology is the most advanced in the Accord. They grow more food on one planet than most species grow on 10. On the Sindari homeworld, Maureen learned about the withdrawal while meeting with his council of advisors. His pale face grew even paler as he read the report. "Human engineers maintain our shield generators on 47 border worlds," his military advisor said. "Without them, those systems will be defenseless against pirates within a year. Human doctors staff 70% of our medical stations in the Outer Rim," his health minister added. "If they leave, millions could die from diseases we can no longer treat." Marine slammed his fist on the table. This is posturing. They are trying to scare us. Send a message to the human embassy. Tell them we are willing to discuss their concerns. But when his messenger reached the embassy on Velar Prime, he found it empty. The doors were open. The lights were off. Every human was gone. They had left only one thing behind. A small note on Ambassador Yuna's desk, written in neat handwriting. You wanted us primitive? Enjoy your advancement without us. The panic began slowly. At first, the Accord leaders told themselves that humanity would return. They had nowhere else to go. They needed the Accord as much as the Accord needed them. But the humans did not return. On Earth, Defense Minister Salmon activated Protocol Quiet Sky. It was a plan that had been created decades ago, a plan that no one had ever expected to use. It called for the complete withdrawal of all human personnel from Accord space. Cargo ships left alien ports by the thousands. Medical staff packed their equipment and boarded transports. Engineers shut down their workshops and headed home. Soldiers said goodbye to their alien comrades and marched back to human vessels. It was the largest movement of people in human history. And it happened in perfect silence. Admiral Wu Jin commanded the human fleet during the withdrawal. He was a tall man with gray hair and cold eyes. He had served the Accord for 30 years. He had lost friends defending alien worlds. Now he was bringing everyone home. His flagship, the HSS Resolve, patrolled the border between human space and Accord territory. Every day, more ships arrived carrying human citizens. Every day, his fleet grew larger. One night, a Sindari vessel appeared at the border. It was small and unarmed, a civilian transport, human vessel. The Sindari captain called over the radio. We request permission to enter your space. We have medical supplies that we wish to return to you. Wu Jin looked at the ship on his screen. He knew what this was. A peace offering. A first step toward reconciliation. Permission denied, he said. Turn back. Please, the captain begged. We only want to talk. We want to make things right. Wu Jin thought about all the years he had spent serving the Accord. He thought about the friends he had buried on alien soil. He thought about the laughter in the council chamber. You should have thought about that before you mocked our ambassador, he said. Human space is closed to all Accord vessels. Any ship that crosses our border will be destroyed. He cut the transmission. On Earth, the resources that had once flowed outward now poured inward. Factories that had built ships for the Accord now built ships for humanity. Scientists who had solved alien problems now focused on human advancement. Money that had funded foreign aid now funded human colonies. In the span of 6 months, humanity changed. They had been servants for a century. Now they were free. And they were very, very angry. The Galactic Accord had made a terrible mistake. They had taken humanity for granted. They had assumed that the young species would always be there to serve them. Now they would learn what it meant to stand alone. 6 months passed. The galaxy began to fall apart. On the Velari homeworld, the first signs of disaster appeared in the fields. The crops that had once grown tall and strong now withered and died. The soil, used for centuries without rest, had lost its strength. Human scientists had found ways to fix this problem. Human shipments had filled the gaps when harvests failed. But the humans were gone. Elder. Nara stood at the edge of her family's farm, watching the brown dead plants stretch toward the horizon. She was old now, old enough to remember a time before humanity joined the Accord. She had never thought she would see such dark days again. We have enough stored food for 3 months, her grandson told her. After that, we will need a ration. And after that? Nara asked. Her grandson did not answer. He did not need to. Across Velari Prime, hunger spread like a slow fire. Children grew thin. The elderly grew weak. The government promised that help was coming, but everyone knew the truth. No help was coming. On the Korath border, Draven stood in the command center of Station 12. The massive outpost had once protected an entire sector from pirates and raiders. Now it was dying. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Engineers ran back and forth, trying to fix systems they did not fully understand. The shield generator is failing, an officer reported. We have maybe 2 days before it goes offline completely. Draven slammed his fist against the wall. Human technology, he growled. We should never have relied on them, sir. The humans did not force us to use their designs. We chose to because they were better than anything else we had. Draven turned on the officer with fury in his eyes. But he said nothing. Because the officer was right. The shield generator failed the next day. Within a week, pirates attacked the station. They killed 200 people and stole everything of value. Draven barely escaped with his life. It was the same story across the border. Stations went dark one by one. Colonies called for help that never came. The Korath military, once the pride of the Accord, could not protect its own people. But the worst disaster happened on Sindari Prime. It started with a cough. A small mutation of an old virus, something that had been controlled for centuries. Human doctors had developed treatments that worked perfectly. Human hospitals had stocks of medicine that could cure it in days, but the human doctors were gone. The medicine was gone, and the virus spread. Maureen watched the death toll climb from his palace window. 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. The numbers kept growing day after day, week after week. His advisors told him to close the borders, to quarantine the infected cities, to let the sick die so the healthy could live. We cannot do that, Maureen said, his voice hollow. We are civilized beings. But in the end, they had no choice. Cities were sealed. Families were separated. The sick were left to die alone, without comfort or care, by the time the plague burned itself out. 2 million Sindari were dead. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. The great hall that had once echoed with laughter now held only fear and desperation. We must bring the humans back, the Valari delegate pleaded. Her fur was dull and thin from stress. We are dying without them. Draven, who had lost half his weight in 6 months, shook his head. And admit we were wrong? Show the entire galaxy that we cannot survive without the primitives we mocked. Pride will not feed our children, the Valari delegate shot back. Pride will not heal our sick or defend our borders. Maureen sat in silence. He had aged 20 years in 12 months. The plague had killed his wife and his youngest son. He no longer cared about pride. Send a message to Earth, he said quietly. Ask them to talk. The message was sent. Earth did not reply. Meanwhile, humanity thrived. The resources that had once supported the Accord now flowed into human development. New colonies were founded. New technologies were invented. The human population grew faster than ever before. In the orbital shipyards above Mars, Admiral Wujin watched his new fleet take shape. These ships were not designed for peacekeeping or escort duty. They were warships, pure and simple. Faster, stronger, and more deadly than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Beautiful, are they not? Asked Salman, the defense minister. She had come to inspect the construction personally. They are tools, Wujin replied. Nothing more, Salman smiled. Tools can be beautiful, especially when they are well made. One morning, a Sindari medical ship appeared at the human border. It was desperate for supplies. Thousands of people on board were dying from diseases that human medicine could cure in hours. Wujin received the transmission on the bridge of the Resolve. Please, the Sindari captain begged. We have children on board, mothers, fathers. They have done nothing wrong. They do not deserve to die because of what our leaders did. Wujin looked at the ship on his screen. He thought about the 2 million dead on Sindari Prime. He thought about the plague that human doctors could have stopped. He thought about the laughter in the council chamber. You are not authorized to enter human space, he said. Turn back. People are dying. The captain screamed. Do you hear me? They are dying right now as we speak. Wujin nodded slowly. Yes, he said. They are. He cut the transmission. The ship drifted at the border for 3 days. Then it turned around and limped back toward Sindari space. How many died during those 3 days? No one ever knew. On Earth, some people protested. They said that humanity was better than this, that they should help the suffering no matter what had happened in the past. President Deho listened to their arguments. Then he gave his answer. They had 100 years to treat us with respect. They chose not to. Now they will live with the consequences. The protesters fell silent. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Humanity had always seemed soft, kind, forgiving, but they had been pushed too far. And when humans decided to be cold, they could be colder than the void itself. 1 year after the Severance War came to the galaxy, the Nexian Empire had watched the Accord weaken for months. They had seen the border defenses crumble. They had counted the dead from plague and famine. They had measured the fear in the eyes of once proud delegates, and they had decided to strike. The first attack came without warning. Nexian warships poured across the border into Korath space, their weapons blazing. Colony after colony fell. Cities burned. Millions fled their homes. Draven received the news while eating a meal of rationed food. He dropped his fork and stared at the report, his yellow eyes wide with terror. How many ships? He asked. 2,000, sir. Maybe more. They are moving faster than anything we have ever seen, and Draven closed his eyes. The Korath military had been decimated by a year of chaos. Their best weapons had been human designs, and the humans had taken all their technical support when they left. His people could not win this war. They could barely survive it. Call the council, he said. We need help. But the council had no help to give. The Veleri were starving. The Sindari were still recovering from the plague. The other species had their own problems, their own fears, their own failures. Only one hope remained. The delegation that traveled to Earth was small and humble. Draven led it himself, along with Maureen and the Velari delegate. They were the same three who had laughed loudest at Yuna. 1 year ago, their ship was stopped at the human border by a fleet of gleaming warships. The largest was the HSS Resolve, its hull dark and smooth, its weapons pointed directly at them. State your purpose. A cold voice said over the radio. Draven took a deep breath. We are delegates from the Galactic Accord. We request permission to travel to Earth. There was a long silence. Then the voice spoke again. Permission granted. You will follow our ships exactly. Any deviation will result in your destruction. They were escorted through human space, like prisoners. Through the windows, they saw colonies that glowed with light and life. They saw shipyards building vessels beyond anything the Accord had ever created. They saw humanity thriving while the rest of the galaxy crumbled. On the orbital station above Earth, they were met by a young officer named Minji. She was small and slim, with short black hair and eyes that held no warmth. You wish to address the assembly, she said. It was not a question. Draven nodded. We request assistance. The Nexian Empire has attacked our space. Without help, we will be destroyed. Minji smiled. It was not a kind smile. Humanity heard your laughter, representative. We remember it well. She led them down to the planet's surface. They landed in Sol, the capital of United Earth. The city was beautiful and clean, filled with people who walked with pride and purpose. The United Earth Assembly met in a great hall of glass and steel. President Deho sat at the center, his face calm and unreadable. Around him sat the leaders of humanity, men and women who had spent a year building their people back up from nothing. The alien delegates stood before them, like criminals before a judge. 100 years, Deho said slowly. 100 years of service, sacrifice, and good faith. And you mocked our ambassador for asking to be treated as equals. Draven lowered his head. The scales on his face had lost their shine. He looked old and broken. We were wrong, he said. I was wrong. I know that now. Do you? Deho leaned forward. Or do you simply need what we have? Silence filled the hall. Maureen stepped forward. Tears ran down his pale face. My wife is dead. My son is dead. 2 million of my people are dead. All because we were too proud to ask for help. Too proud to admit that we needed the humans we had mocked. He fell to his knees. I am not here to make excuses. I am here to beg. Please, help us. Not because we deserve it, we do not. But because you are better than we are? Because you have always been better. The hall was silent. Every human in the room stared at the kneeling Sundari. Foreign Minister Hannah rose from her seat. She was a tall woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. In her hands, she held a tablet displaying a document. Humanity is prepared to offer assistance, she said, but the terms have changed. She walked toward the delegates, her footsteps echoing in the silence. You will accept human oversight of all Accord military operations. Human representatives will hold permanent veto power in the Council. Reparations will be paid to Earth for 100 years of service that was taken for granted. She held out the tablet. These terms are not negotiable. You accept them, or you leave. Draven took the tablet with trembling hands. He read the document slowly, his eyes growing wider with each line. This makes humanity the dominant power in the Accord, he whispered. Hannah nodded. Yes, it does. We would be giving up our independence, our pride. Everything we have built over 10,000 years? You already lost those things, Hannah said. You lost them when you laughed at our ambassador. This is simply the price of getting them back. Draven looked at Morin, at the Valari delegate, at the faces of his fellow delegates, all of them broken and desperate. Then he looked back at the humans, at their calm eyes and straight backs, at their strength and their certainty. Accept, he said. Hannah took the tablet back. Then welcome to the new Galactic Accord. This time, you will remember who your friends are. The documents were signed that day. Human ships began moving toward Koreth space before the delegates had even left. Earth, the galaxy, was about to witness something it had never seen before. Humanity at war. The human fleet arrived at Koreth Prime on a Tuesday. Admiral Wujin stood on the bridge of the HSS Resolve looking at the battle ahead. Nexian ships filled the sky like angry wasps, their weapons carving lines of fire through the darkness. Korath defense forces were in full retreat. Their ships were old and tired. Their crews were scared and desperate. They had been fighting alone for weeks, and they were losing badly. All ships, this is Admiral Wujin, he said calmly. Form attack pattern Delta 7, weapons free. The human fleet moved like a single creature. 200 warships slid into perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. They were smaller than the Nexian vessels, but they were faster, smarter, deadlier. The first volley of human weapons lit up the sky. Nexian ships began to explode. 1, then 10, then 50. The enemy formation broke apart as panic spread through their ranks. They had expected to face the broken Accord. They had not expected this. Press the attack, Wujin ordered. Do not let them regroup. For 3 hours the battle raged. Human ships danced through enemy fire, striking and retreating, wearing down the Nexian forces one piece at a time. It was not the brute force warfare that the galaxy was used to. It was something new, something precise, something beautiful in its deadly efficiency. When the last Nexian ship finally surrendered, the surviving Koreth crews could only stare in amazement. A Koreth officer named Talon was brought aboard the Resolve. He had served on Draven's staff before the war. Now his uniform was torn and burned, and his scales were covered in soot. You saved us, he said, his voice breaking. After everything we did to you, after everything we said, you saved us. Wujin looked at the young officer. He remembered all the years he had spent serving ungrateful aliens. All the friends he had lost. All the insults he had swallowed. We did not save you for your sake, he said finally. We saved you because it was right. Because when humans give their word, they keep it. That is the difference between your people and mine. Alan bowed his head. He had no response to that. The war lasted 18 more months. Human forces pushed the Nexians back, system by system, planet by planet. They did not fight with rage or cruelty. They fought with cold, calculated precision. The final battle took place in Nexian space itself. Admiral Wujin led the attack personally, his fleet cutting through enemy defenses like a knife through water. When the Nexian High Command finally surrendered, they did so on their knees. Peace came to the galaxy. But it was a different kind of peace than before. Human engineers spread across the Accord, rebuilding what had been destroyed. They repaired shield generators and power plants. They constructed new hospitals and research stations. They taught alien workers how to maintain their own systems, so they would never be helpless again. Human doctors returned to the medical stations they had abandoned. They healed the sick and trained new healers. On Sindari Prime, they built a memorial to the 2 million who had died in the plague. Human and Sindari names were carved side by side on walls of white stone. Human soldiers took up positions on border stations throughout the galaxy, but they were not alone anymore. They trained Korath warriors and Valari scouts and Sindari medics. They shared their tactics and their discipline. They built an army that belonged to everyone. Ambassador Yuna returned to Velar Prime. She walked through the same corridors she had walked 2 years before. She entered the same great hall where she had been mocked and humiliated. But this time, everything was different. The delegates rose to their feet as she entered. Every species, every representative, they stood in silence as she walked to the central platform. Yuna looked out at the assembly. She saw Draven, who had lost so much of his pride. She saw Maureen, who had lost so much more than that. She saw the Valari delegate, who had finally found the courage to speak up when it mattered. "You asked us once when humanity would evolve past our primitive emotions," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "Now you know the answer." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We never will. Our rage drove us to leave. Our pride drove us to succeed without you. Our compassion, despite everything you did to us, drove us to return and save you." Her eyes swept across the silent hall. "Do not mistake our mercy for weakness. We remember the laughter. We will always remember. But we have chosen to move forward, to build something better. To prove that the primitive species you mocked is capable of greatness you cannot imagine." No one spoke. No one moved. "Welcome to the new Galactic Accord," Yuna said. "This time, you will treat us as equals. Not because you want to, but because you know what happens when you do not." She stepped down from the platform and took her seat at the head of the council table. The seat that had always been reserved for the eldest species, the seat of honor. No one objected. On Earth, a monument was built outside the United Earth Assembly in Seoul. It was a simple pillar of black stone, reaching toward the sky. On it were carved the names of every human who had served the Accord during the first 100 years. The doctors and engineers, the soldiers and diplomats, the workers who had given everything and received only mockery in return. At the base of the pillar, an inscription was carved in letters of gold. They called us primitive. They were half right. We are young. We are emotional. We hold grudges and fight among ourselves. But we also love fiercely, forgive eventually, and never ever forget who we are. Yuna visited the monument on the anniversary of the severance. She stood alone in the quiet morning light, reading the names of people she had known. People who had served with honor. People who had deserved better. Ginho found her there an hour later. He was no longer her deputy. He was the head of the new Galactic Security Council. But he still came to stand beside her when she needed him.
Oh.
"Do you think we did the right thing?" Yuna asked. "Going back to them?" Jinho thought about the question for a long moment. "I think we did the human thing," he said. "We showed them that strength and kindness can exist together, that you can be powerful without being cruel, that you can win without destroying everything." Yuna nodded slowly. "The human thing," she repeated. "I like that." She took one last look at the monument, at the names of the fallen, at the inscription that said everything about who her people were. Then she turned and walked away. Toward a future that humanity would build with its own hands. The galaxy had learned a simple truth that day. A truth that would be remembered for 10,000 years. Humanity asked only for respect. Deny them that, and they would take it. But give them respect, treat them as equals. They would give you everything they had. That was the bargain. That was the promise. That was what it meant to be human.